Okay, so if you're currently building anything with AI, you definitely know the feeling, right? A new model seems to drop like every single Tuesday, and every single one claims it's the new frontier. It's just a lot. Overwhelming, really. So today we're going to cut through all that noise. We're focusing on one specific and I think massive shift. That's xAI's Grok 4 Fast. Our mission here is to unpack not just what it does, but how its unique mix of performance and pricing. It forces you to pretty much immediately rethink your engineering roadmap.
Yeah, absolutely. We've pulled together a really comprehensive analysis here. We're zeroing in on the hard data, the benchmarks, the pricing strategy, and crucially, how it works for actual enterprise use cases. This isn't about the hype cycle. It's meant to give you, the listener, a kind of usable framework, something to help make deployment decisions, like this week.
And let's just put the main takeaway right at the top.
Yeah.
You're getting near frontier quality AI, but now it's at commodity prices. And that just changes the whole game. It means these advanced capabilities, stuff that used to be just for maybe expensive weekly experiments, now they're actually viable for daily use at scale, in production.
Let's dig into how they're claiming this. The core concept seems to be this thing called intelligence density. What exactly is that? The analysis introduces it as key. If quality is roughly equal, how do you measure efficiency?
Right. Think of intelligence density. Like a really efficient engine, maybe hyper-efficient is the word. It's about the output you get per unit of compute power. Grok 4 Fast is claiming to be the new king here because it manages complex reasoning with, well, fewer computational steps. The source calls it fewer thinking tokens.
Yeah.
So you get like massive horsepower, but from a tiny tank of gas.
That's a great way to put it. So how do they actually engineer that? What's the architecture look like under the hood? What's really interesting, I think, is the unified model approach. They've built a single model. It has one set of weights, but two behaviors. And you guide it just by steering the prompt. Do you need a super quick answer, almost instant? Or do you need it to pause, maybe reflect a bit, think deeper? Having this dual function in one structure, that really cuts down latency. And it simplifies your tech stack because you're not constantly juggling, a fast model and a deep thinking model.
That efficiency part is huge for cost, obviously. But efficiency doesn't mean much if you can't feed the model enough relevant data, right? And that seems to bring us to the architectural game changer. Everyone's buzzing about that 2 million token context window, 2M. That capacity is just staggering.
It really is. And the implications for you, the person actually building things, are immediate. A 2 million token context window means you can now pass in like entire product manuals or huge multi-chapter legal contracts, even large chunks of your proprietary code base, all in a single API request.
Whoa, hang on. Let's pause there because that's critical. For listeners running RAG systems, retrieval augmented generation, what specific pain point does that enormous capacity just erase?
It basically eliminates the need for those really complex, often brittle chunking strategies, and it drastically cuts down your orchestration overhead. See, right now with huge documents, you have to write all this fragile glue code just to break the document into smaller pieces the model can handle. And often the model sees them out of order or loses context. That's where you get those annoying chunking bugs, right? Where the AI misses something vital because the breaks were just in the wrong places. Grok 4 Fast, with this huge window, it essentially lets you skip most of that fragile, complex step. Simpler stack, fewer bugs, much better.
Okay, architectural simplicity, fewer bugs. Got it. Now, let's pivot to performance benchmarks. They're always the first thing people look at, but honestly, sometimes they feel a bit abstract. So where does Grok 4 Fast actually sit in the rankings? These numbers translate to, real-world value in an application.
Yeah, benchmarks. They're a useful compass, like the source says, but definitely not the whole map. But yes, the numbers do confirm this model is performing squarely in the same weight class as the current top-tier general models, like GPT-4, Claude 3, Opus, etc.
Okay, give us the highlights then, the ones that actually matter for an organization building stuff, not just for a research lab.
Absolutely. So look at the 85.7% score on GPQA Diamond. That tests difficult scientific reasoning and knowledge recall. A score like that predicts real success in tasks like analytical writing or high-level research assistance, stuff that usually needs a human expert.
Okay, and for the developers listening, how does it do on the things that, keep our code working?
The math and coding scores are really strong. On math evaluations like A and HMMT, it hit 92.0% and 93.3%. Those scores map pretty directly to the kind of planning and algorithmic thinking you need for writing solid code or reviewing it effectively. But maybe the most important metric for day-to-day practical skill is the 80.0% score on LiveCodeBench.
Okay, why is LiveCodeBench more vital than, say, older code benchmarks?
Because LiveCodeBench specifically tests practical coding skill on fresh, real-world problems the model likely hasn't seen in training, so it tracks actual day-to-day developer productivity much better than older tests, where, frankly, the models might have just memorized the answers from the training data. This shows it can solve new problems efficiently.
Right, so we're looking at a model with seemingly elite performance, a massive context window, and this high intelligence density.
Yeah.
That sounds expensive. But this is where the conversation gets really interesting, right? Because you can have the best engine, but if the fuel costs like $50 a gallon, you just can't scale it.
Exactly. That's the strategic heart of this whole thing. The review emphasizes that the model gets these top results while consistently using fewer thinking tokens on average. And that efficiency advantage gets passed directly on to you, the user, in the form of a lower bill.
Okay, let's talk dollars and cents then. Lay out the pricing for us, because this is the kind of information that makes engineering leads immediately start rethinking their roadmaps. Right, the API pricing for Grok 4 Fast is, well, it's startlingly low. For inputs under 128,000 tokens, it's just 0.20 cent per million input tokens. And outputs, 0.50 cents per million output tokens. I mean, that's already super aggressive. It puts it way below many competitors that are actually posting lower benchmark scores.
But wait, the real kicker, the genius part for large-scale apps, is the cached input cost for repeated prompts, which is exactly what you do constantly in argy pipelines when you're querying against that huge 2M context. The cost plummets. It drops to just 0.055 cents per million cached input tokens.
5 cents. Seriously.
Yeah,
That's,
cool.
wow. That feels like it's specifically designed to make it almost financially irresponsible not to use that huge context window.
It really is. And the source material drives this home with a very tangible example. Let's say you run a typical product knowledge query. Maybe 60,000 input tokens referencing a big document, and it generates 1,500 output tokens. That whole round trip costs, and I quote, well under a cent.
Okay. That is pretty much the definition of commodity pricing for what's being positioned as a frontier or near frontier product.
It fundamentally shifts the economics. The strategic implication here is huge. You can now actually move sophisticated, reasoning-heavy AI applications from just being pilot projects to full-scale production deployment without constantly worrying about the costs spiraling out of control. If your engineering team knows they can rely on predictable low costs, they can build bigger scale faster. And that means major projects that might have been on the back burner, they get moved way up the roadmap.
Okay, shifting gears slightly to enterprise utility. Let's talk about the specific differentiators beyond just cost. That 2M context window is obviously key, but how does it solve those internal architectural headaches beyond just getting rid of the chunking bugs we mentioned?
Well, it simplifies the entire retrieval part of your RG system. You end up needing fewer round trips to your vector database or search index. You need fewer embeddings to create and maintain. And crucially, like we said, less glue code. In big organizations, complexity is almost always the enemy of reliability, right? Grok 4 Fast seems to boost reliability simply by reducing the number of moving parts needed to understand large amounts of information.
What about tool use? This is another big one for enterprises. We don't just need chatbots. We need models that can actively do things. Browse the web, analyze data, synthesize information.
Yeah, and this is another area highlighted in the analysis. Grok 4 Fast apparently has state-of-the-art search and tool use capabilities built in. It was specifically trained to make decisions about when to use tools. When should it browse the internet? When should it follow a link it finds? When should it try to read specific media, like a PDF or an image on X? And importantly, how to synthesize all that information and provide citations. This capability moves it beyond being just a simple chatbot. It starts to function more like a working analyst for your knowledge management tasks.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here a bit. If the price is this low, the architecture this simple, the context this huge, and the performance this high, where's the catch? Where's the trade-off? Did they maybe skimp on the safety and security side of things?
That is exactly the right question to ask. And according to the analysis we reviewed, the security baseline is documented and seems quite robust. The model's safety systems include refusing high-risk requests, like generating harmful content, and it shows strong resistance to common prompt injection techniques. Now, obviously, you still need your own enterprise security layers on top. You can't just rely solely on the vendor's claims, but it provides a strong starting point, a solid foundation, which is really important, especially for regulated industries.
And operationally, going back to that unified model point, having one model with two modes, steered by the prompt, that means simply routing in production too, right?
Precisely. If you look at older setups, maybe pre-Grok stacks, engineering teams often had to build this complex, almost like traffic cop logic. It had to figure out, okay, is this a simple request? Send it to the fast, cheaper model. Is this a hard one? Route it to the slower, more powerful, expensive model. Grok 4 Fast, by having that single model structure steered by the prompt, just eliminates a lot of that routing complexity. Fewer rules, simpler logic, and ultimately fewer points where things can break in production.
So let's bring it home. If you're a technical leader listening right now, maybe thinking about trying this out, what's the immediate actionable framework for deciding whether to make the switch?
The decision framework outlined in the source is really practical. It says when you run a pilot, you absolutely must measure 3 core things. First, quality. And judge this with a human rubric. Does the output actually meet the bar for your specific use case? Second, latency. And don't just look at the average, the median. Focus on the tail latency, the 95th and 99th percentiles. That tells you if your worst-case user experience is still acceptable.
Right, the tail latency is key for user satisfaction.
Yeah.
And the third metric, I'm guessing it involves cost.
Exactly. Cost per completed task. Forget vanity metrics like tokens generated per second or something. You need to tune your application and measure the total cost required to successfully achieve the desired outcome for your user. That's the bottom line.
The sources also give a good summary of who really benefits most here. It sounds like it's pretty broad, not just one niche sector.
No, it's quite broad. For startups, it offers probably the best price-to-performance ratio out there right now. Lets them ship complex AI features without needing, massive funding rounds just for API calls. Product teams get that predictable cost structure and reliable speed, especially for RG systems powering features. And then for large enterprises, it potentially unlocks entirely new workflows. Think legal document review at scale, compliance monitoring, maybe even scaled customer support analysis, all thanks to that massive 2M context capacity.
Okay, but we have to touch on the limitations too. No model is perfect. What are the open questions or areas where teams really need to do their own testing?
Yeah, 2 main things stand out from the analysis. First, while the refusal behavior on harmful stuff is generally strong, it can apparently be a bit spiky or unpredictable on particularly sensitive or, say, politically charged topics. So you definitely need to do targeted testing in any domains that are sensitive for your business to ensure it behaves consistently and appropriately. Second, while the benchmarks are great, public data on latency under heavy, sustained production load, that's still a bit limited. So you absolutely have to stress test your own implementation, measure those tokens per second on your own stack under your typical load before you commit to a full-scale rollout. Ultimately, it comes down to tuning for what your users actually care about. Is the quality good enough? Is it fast enough? And is the price predictable and acceptable?
All right, so to wrap up our deep dive today, Grok 4 Fast doesn't seem like just another small, incremental model update. It feels like a really practical step forward, one that directly impacts budgets and roadmaps because it tackles that core problem of making advanced AI reasoning economically viable at scale.
And the best advice, the most actionable takeaway from the source material we looked at is really simple. Run a 1-week pilot. Start now. There's even a suggested 5-day plan. Day 1, define your specific success criteria. What does good look like for you? And get your logging set up properly. Day 2 and 3, get the API integrated, work on tightening up your prompts for this model, and critically enable that cache input feature right away to see the cost savings. Day 4 is about testing the edges. Hammer it with failure modes. Try prompt injections, see how it handles really long context edge cases, push its limits.
And day 5, bring it all together.
Exactly. Day 5, summarize those results clearly for your stakeholders. You need to show them the evidence, screenshots, and dollar figures, as the source puts it, to really prove that the value proposition holds up for your specific needs.
Okay, so here's the final thought to leave you with. Building on everything we've discussed, if the main thing holding you back from using truly powerful, frontier-level AI models was simply the cost, the economic near impossibility of scaling complex reasoning, and if that cost has now genuinely been slashed down to what this analysis calls commodity-like rates, then what previously impossible or maybe just unfeasible applications are you now actually free to explore and, more importantly, to build? That feels like the real challenge and opportunity that Grok 4 Fast puts on your desk today.